an RF engineering analysis, an alternative site analysis, and a property valuation analysis. And all those were attached as exhibits. So an overview of the facility design. So again, this is a 60-foot facility, an RF engineering analysis, an alternative site analysis, and
Okay.
So it does have concealment elements. It was designed as a silo to blend in with the natural agricultural surroundings of the property. There's an equipment shelter there that was also built kind of to look like, you know, a mini shed, mini barn. It's got the dark barn red painting on it. The security measures, there's a door on the silo that's locked. There's a door on the equipment shelter that's locked. It has the appropriate signage that we're required to put on there by the FCC and the like. Noise attenuation was an issue that we needed to address. Both, again, the equipment and the facility itself are enshrouded in enclosures. And we were out there today, the condensers were on. We could hear the cows mooing and the birds chirping, but you couldn't hear anything from the facility. And it's been constructed since 2018. We've not received any complaints from the neighbors about noise, et cetera. So if you haven't seen it, haven't driven by, this is what it looks like. As Mr. Entz, indicated, this is a unique position because this facility is actually built. So you can see what it looks like, and we can see what it looks like from a visual impact perspective. The silo design, the red barn, kind of construction of the equipment shelter. So like I said, we did a visual impact analysis, which is required by the code. Initially, this was proposed as a 100-foot facility in height. With the topography of the area, there's a lot of dips and valleys. And so we said we can come down to 60 feet in order to still be able to provide the service over the topography issues. We talked about the location. In 2017, the nearest residential facility was 650 feet. Since this site has actually been constructed, there has been new development, in particular 13 new residences that are actually within 225 feet. They were built, they were sold, purchased with that facility existing. So homeowners and neighbors knew what they were buying and what they were going to see in their backyard. There is some level of visual screening from every property within 1,000 feet, except for those 13 new properties. We provided, as part of the visual impact analysis, 34 pictures from different locations throughout around this. It was Exhibit G is the visual impact analysis in your application packet. I'm not going to go through all 34 pictures tonight, but I did just want to give a few previews of some different locations where we did take pictures. So this one is from Lava Flow Drive. So if you're looking down, you can see that's the silo there. And those houses to the right in this picture are those new houses that were not there initially when the facility was constructed. This is a view from the St. George Golf Course. It's actually kind of hard to even see. If I can make this work. It's kind of, it's right there in the trees. So you'll see that the trees surround it and kind of blends in. If there are leaves there, there's even more coverage. This is a picture from the new residential development. And so you'll kind of see, what was working? Oh, there we go. That's it right there, but it doesn't rise any higher than those houses. You can kind of see the top of it. When you look at it from this perspective, you can see where it is relative to those houses, but it's not above the ridge line. It's right in line with that ridge line. So there's really pretty minimal impact there. Then we also took some pictures from the Sunbrook neighborhood. This is one from Canyon Drive. It's about 0.3 miles southwest of the silo, and it's looking northeast towards the silo. And it's pretty hard to see. It's kind of tucked right back in there where I've got the green pointer. And then this is another one from the Sunbrook neighborhood. And this was at the corner of Emerald, I believe. Yeah, Emerald Drive and Box Canyon Drive. And this is about 0.2 miles west of where the facility is located. And again, it's not above that ridge line, the view. It's below the ridge line there of what you see. It's not blocking any views. It kind of blends in with the houses behind it. there fairly well. Then we also provided in there photo simulations. So like we said, there was a monopole. This is designed as a silo. There were options to either do it as a monopole. And so again, you can see this was done back in 2017 when we initially filed, and there wasn't the residential development, but that's what a 60-foot monopole would have looked like. So you would have had your more traditional wireless facility kind of sticking out without any concealment elements. And then that's another view of the monopole design, and it's kind of, it's kind of stuck in there to the left of the watering. And then we also included in there a photo sim what the monopine would look like. Not as close up, harder to see, but really a monopine kind of, there's no other tree coverage that would have matched the 60-foot monopine. So it really would have been sticking out as a tree. The silo on there, like we said, it's an agricultural property. It's got the cows, it's got other, equipment and the like. It really kind of blends in more with what the property and the natural surroundings are. So that's just an overview of the visual impact analysis we did. And now at this time, I'm going to have Jeff come up, our RF engineer, and talk about why this site is needed from a coverage and capacity perspective. He prepared a very detailed RF engineering analysis, which was included as Exhibit C, and it's 38 pages. So we've narrowed it down to about 7 or 8 pages, and I'll have Jeff come up and explain that.
Hello, I'm Jeff. I'm an RF engineer for this area for Verizon Wireless. Just want to start off by talking about why this site is needed. So as probably everyone knows here, over a good 90% of American households use cell phones for everything from calls, texts, web browsing, etc. A good over 60% of American adults use cell phones exclusively. They don't even need a landline at home. Another key point I found very interesting is the data usage by smartphones. They're going from 7 gigabytes monthly in 2017 to over 39 gigabytes in 2024 is the predicted value. So the usage is just soaring, as it best be put. And then lastly, a good bullet point here is over 80% of 911 calls are originated from wireless devices. So it's very important that first responders get to these and can act on these calls. All right, the next slide is going to be the wireless service around this area with Charbonne not on the air. There's a couple macros around this area. They're already past our engineering capacities due to the growth of this cities. So Charbonne is needed to greatly maintain the network and keep a good user experience here for the surrounding area. The Charbonne macro is helping densify the current network. It's helping offload the surrounding cell sites that serve this area. And it also enables us to provide new services that will be coming up when new technologies are developed for Verizon. She's working on it. Another key point I'd like to point out is the macro usage has changed greatly since COVID. Way more people are working remotely nowadays than ever, which shifted the traffic on the cell sites. So these have become very important for residences and businesses to support, video streaming, conferencing, just normal working at home, which leads to the importance of the Charbonne cell site. Okay, I'd like to shift into propagation maps. I'll be showing you a couple propagation maps here, but couple key points I'd like to discuss here is a couple problems with the network are capacity, which is overuse, and coverage. So coverage is based on an RF level of, it's addressable by measured in RSRP. And then capacity is what is the user's experience on their cell phone, like while browsing the web or whatever. Okay. So I'll go to this picture here. This is representing the surrounding area pulled back a little bit, showing the other macros and where Charbonne would be is at, excuse me, right there. And what I'm trying to highlight here is, so up to the north is a site called Santa Clara, right in here. That's one of our macros. And then down to the south is Halfway. These are 3 sector sites. So it's kind of like having 3 sites in one, right? And that's why you're seeing different colors. But I highlighted the 2 colors here. The one in teal for pointing south for Santa Clara, that is shown right here. And then this northern sector of Halfway in yellow pointing north. And the reason I did this is a very large geographical area for Charbonne, not on the air, to cover. So this oval here is where Charbonne would be normally covering, and it's being depicted here of what the network would have to do without this Charbonne site. So then I'll move to this next slide here. And this next slide represents, so now I have turned back on the Charbonne macro, and this is the geographical area. Once again, it's a 3-sector site. If you look, this is the northern sector, this is the eastern sector, and this is the southern. But it's actually still quite a large geographical area that this macro is covering. The map to the left is just to kind of give you a layout of the area so you can orient yourself of where we're at. And then the map on the right, once again, is where Charbonne is covering currently in the network to show how large of an area this is covering and how important the macro is. So that's the geographical coverage part of that presentation. Now I'm going to move to propagation maps of an RF level. The best way to describe the RF level is just best services, which is green, medium service, which we show in yellow, and poor service, which is in this like salmon color here. There's a good description here, but that's the overview of it. So once again, I'm going to show you a map without Charbonne on the air, so this slide makes sense. Here's the Santa Clara site on air, and the green legend is the best service, right? So right around the Santa Clara site, you can see that we have the best service. You could be indoors, you can be doing whatever you need to do, and you're going to have a very good user experience. And then as you get further away from that site, you'll go to the medium service, and then here, like more towards the east, you're going to see that edge of what I'd call poor service, poor best service. And then if I turn the Charbonne site on in this next slide, there's the improvement that we're seeing. So the biggest improvement, of course, is right at the Charbonne site itself. And then it has a lot of southern exposure here as well to provide that best level of RF service. And then even here to the east, the medium service, if I jump back here once and then go to this other slide, it's improving that as well right there to the east. Okay. Basically, Rob, it's here. It's once again trying to represent the massive increase in usage. Minutes of use of increased dramatically, and the amount of data that is used by these sites is increasing dramatically, over 136% from 2019 to 2022. So the site is getting highly used and is very critical to maintain a network here. And that was it for me. I'd like to turn this over to Dan.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Dan Thurgood. I work with Technology Associates. I'm the site consultant for Verizon on this project. I did not work the original project, but I was involved with it back when it first started, and then I've now since taken it over. So I am very familiar with all aspects of it, and the different areas that we searched for originally, and then also why this site is important where it is located right now. There were multiple alternatives that were considered when we started looking at this site. And as we started to narrow it down, it turned into pretty much three key areas or three key locations that we could put a site that could potentially work for RF to meet their needs and to work for Verizon's network. One of the sites is where the site is currently located now at the farm. And then the other two key alternatives were Arrowhead Elementary, which is located just up the hill to the northeast. And then the other one is to the southeast at the Sunbrook Golf Course maintenance yard. So both are located not too far away from the existing site right now. But each of those two key sites had their pros and their cons. And so I put together two slides that talked about that, as well as two photo simulations for the school site, just to give you an idea of what it was going to look like. So the Arrowhead Elementary site, we worked with the school district quite a bit at this location to see if we could put a site there, where it could go on the property, what the impact would be. And over a couple of months of working with them, we really narrowed it down to one location on the property that wouldn't impact the playground, the field area, would allow Verizon's techs access without getting onto the playground and putting any children at risk if we had to have equipment out there. And so where we ended up was on the southwest corner of the property, right along the property line. And I'll show you the picture. I don't have an aerial view of that. So this is just a photo simulation of a monopole, but that's the southwest corner of the elementary school property. And as we were working with the school district on this, they started to see that this probably wasn't going to be a great fit for them and the surrounding neighborhood and community. That pole was the location that we picked and where they thought was acceptable is about 10 feet away from that house's property line. And the facility would have been right up next to the fence, the ground equipment. And so we're depicting here a 60-foot monopole, and the impact was just too much for what the school district had in mind and what they really wanted to see. So we started looking at, okay, is there another type of design that we can do? And so we threw together a photo simulation of a monopine. Once again, it's tough down in southern Utah to do monopines because you don't have a lot of 60-foot tall pine trees down here. So it's just kind of sticking up. The other difference too with a monopine is that instead of 60 feet, we have to go to 67 feet to get that taper. So to go to a monopine, it gets even taller, and it also goes wide. They range from 20 to 25 feet in width. And so now the edge of that pine tree, as you see on the left-hand side there, would have been touching that residence's fence, essentially. So the branches would have been right near their backyard. And so in the end, the school district, after talking with them, they were very interested. They loved the idea of doing a site, but it didn't work for them. And so they no longer thought that it was feasible. And so they came back to us and said, look, we just can't do this. We can't move forward with this. And so we stopped looking at this location and we moved on. The other part of this too is that with the RF signal, it would have been very different up at Arrowhead Elementary versus where it is right now. It's about a 50-foot elevation gain when you go up to Arrowhead. And so if we put a site up there, it wouldn't have been able to see down into the Sunbrook Golf Course Valley. And so it would have served a very different area that we weren't trying to necessarily target. And so it wouldn't have met all of RF's needs. And so overall, Verizon decided without a willing landlord and without a great RF signal, it just wasn't a good fit. And so it took us over to the St. George Golf Course, Sunbrook Golf Course, at the maintenance facility. And where that's located, it's actually not that far from where the site is right now. However, the visual impact would have been greater to more of the residences there along hole number 2, people up higher. they would have been looking down at this. There's more homes pointing towards this facility than where it's currently located right now. And I don't have a photo simulation of this. We couldn't get on the golf course when it wasn't operating, so I couldn't get a picture. But the impact to their neighboring residences was greater than where we are right now with a silo. The other part of it too is that the RF signal was very similar to where the site's located right now. So there wasn't any benefit to going at the golf course versus the current site location from an RF standpoint. But overall, what killed this location is the golf course came back to us in the end and just said, look, we don't want to host a facility here, have it be in the way of the maintenance yard. It could be in the way for future development. And we also don't want it to impact any of the Sunbrook residences. So in the end, they decided that it wasn't a good fit for them and they no longer were interested. And so it really puts us back at the current location right now, that as far as the alternative sites, it really was the best fit for as an RF standpoint, but also as a visual impact standpoint, with it being the concealed silo fits in with the area. And it is also the furthest away from the residences than any of the other facilities. So those were the three locations. There were a few other site alternatives that we looked at. They were much farther away because if we're not right in this area where the site is currently located, you have to get up more into the commercial areas to the north or to the southeast. And both of those properties that we looked at, the topography was just so different. There was no way to see down into the Sunbrook golf course area and the Sunbrook division or subdivision. And so Alt 9, as you can see here, was eventually abandoned because it just didn't see what it needed to. It was too far south. And then the commercial properties, Alt 7 and Alt 10, it was too far north. It couldn't see down inside. But with all the development that St. George is having, that you're having, Verizon's actually working on a facility up there now as well. So even if Verizon were to go up there originally, we'd be right back here looking to go down at its current location. And so with the demand that you have, we're just trying to get everywhere that we possibly can to feed the growth that you're experiencing. And so those were all the different sites and all the different areas that we looked at when approaching this project back in 2017. But even now, as it's brought up again, we verified that this truly is the best location that we can be at. And so that was what we put together for the site alternative analysis. Melissa is going to talk a little bit more about property valuations. So I'm going to hand it back over to her. Okay, thank you.
One of the things that I forgot to mention that I'll just point out quickly is that in the photo simulation for the Monopine Dan mentioned, we wouldn't have been able to just do 60 feet. We would have had to go up to 67 feet. So it's you can see kind of tucked in the middle there at the top. The antennas are tucked in there, but you have to put a top structure on it so it finishes out and the tree looks like a real tree. So if we had done this design, where the silo is, it wouldn't have been at 60 feet. It would have been an additional 7 feet higher as well. So that was one of the considerations. So as I mentioned, one of the things that was we need to talk about as part of the code is the impact on properties. And whether it's the property value of the property itself. We took a look at the assessment of the two petitioners that have been involved in this matter. As you can see, we pulled their values of their homes from 2017 to 2021, before the site was constructed until after it was constructed. And you've seen a significant appreciation for both of those property values. And those are from the county assessor records. Then we also took a look at Zillow estimated values of properties in the Santa Clara, St. George arena area. And then the 84770 zip code is where the Sunbrook neighborhood is located. And some of the individuals that have been opposed to the site So you'll see there's been a significant increase in property values, as I'm sure the Planning Commission and City Council are well aware. You're having to deal with that as the significant growth in the area. And then the last is the Corelogic Realtor.com's estimated values. And again, we took the addresses of the petitioner's property as well as the properties throughout the Sunbrook neighborhood. We looked at what it was in October 2018, around the time the site was constructed, and when we pulled it from February 2022. And you've seen, considerable increase again there in the property values. So with that, just really quickly, we'll not spend a lot of time on legal requirements and get in the weeds here. But Verizon feels that its application has met all the legal requirements we are tasked to comply with, in particular under the Santa Clara City Code. As Jim has mentioned, we've given you the chart of all the applicable provisions. You've got your general planning commission requirements in addition to your facility and antenna requirements. We also took a look at the city's general plan just to make sure we were complying with, the city's growth strategy and, the need to want to maintain kind of the natural surroundings of the area, in particular with your natural parks and the like surrounding you. And then lastly, the Federal Telecommunications Act, Section 332 of the Act, really governs and oversees wireless communications. And it's actually a pretty broad provision that says local governments shall not have the effect shall not prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting wireless services. And in 2018, the FCC came out with an updated order, since we've had a lot of advancement in technology, in particular the small cell technology we're talking about. And what they said was, we can no longer look at how we previously looked at and evaluated facilities, which was, has the applicant demonstrated a significant gap in coverage, and have they shown that this is, the least intrusive alternative? We have to look at it more from is the standard now is, if this decision is made, is it going to materially inhibit or prohibit applicants and wireless providers from being able to compete? And that's the new standard. So while the city code still requires us to go through some of that gap in coverage analysis and alternative site analysis, the federal law actually no longer requires that. We just have to show to you that if this permit isn't granted, it is going to inhibit our service. And you heard from Jeff, our RF engineer, how that will include it in the application packet too. We have a letter from the Santa Clara Fire Department that uses Verizon Wireless services in support of keeping this facility, emergency service providers, respondents, and it's responders. And it's also important to know that just because this is a Verizon facility, people who make 911 calls from any wireless provider, if they can't get through on their network, then our facility, that it will allow the 911 call to go through on our facility. So just further demonstrating the importance of this facility in addition to serving your residents and the significant growth that you've experienced. So with that, thank you. We're here to answer questions. I know that was a lot of information and the application is significant. So Jeff, Dan, and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Well done. I read the whole thing and I don't have any questions. You guys have any?
I do. On page 5 of the application, really the thing that kind of stuck out, we're here after 4 years of doing this. It said Verizon Wireless has not received any complaints since the facility was constructed. There's obviously been a complaint or a lawsuit filed, or what's that meaning? Is that talking about residential complaints?
Correct. Sorry. Yes. Setting aside the petitioners that have filed the lawsuit, so I will clarify that statement. We haven't received any residential complaints. We haven't received complaints.
Noise complaints.
The 13 neighbors, that built the homes near the site. So setting aside the complaints from the petitioners, we've not received any complaints about the visual impact of the facility or anything, noise, anything like that.
Thank you.
Curtis, I would just add to that, I've had conversations with our staff, our department heads, and asked that very question. Have you heard anything? Have residents ever complained? Again, setting aside the litigation and the plaintiffs there, I'm not aware of any complaints or negative comments that have been made by residents since the facility's been operational. So kind of the same boat from the city side.
This is Commissioner Hendrickson online. I read through everything, read the application. Also went down and visited the site from both sides. Went and looked at it from the Sunbrook side and from the Santa Clara side, and well done. I mean, I think it's a incredible way to do it, and I see no impact that way. And I also see the value of increasing the services to our community as a user of cellular services, which I am doing right now from Lake Powell even. It's critical to have these types of things for our use.
Thank you.
Looks like that might be it.
Okay.
Mark, I do have some questions if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Take all the time you need.
Melissa, there were just a few things in the presentation that I wondered if we could get just some additional information on.
Sure.
So going back to close to the beginning of your presentation, there was a slide that said something to the effect of that there is visual screening of the site from all properties within 1,000 feet, or most property. I don't remember exactly the wording, but I wonder if you could just if you could elaborate that on a little bit, what you mean by screening and how you're defining that statement.
Sure, happy to clarify. So, I mean, screening can mean two things, right? It's screened in and of itself because it's concealed as a silo, but then also I was just trying to look at, if you see here, what we mean by screening too is like where it's not going above the ridge line, its height is in line with, like, so if you're looking at that, it's not taller than the mountains behind it. It's actually not taller than the residents behind it. You've got trees that looking at it look just as tall as it is. Then, here, if you're looking you look down, it blends in with the height of all of the other homes as you're looking from it. And that it's not, again, blocking the views. And we know those are really important to the residents of, I believe it's Snow Canyon behind it. And I apologize, my geography is not great, but those views of the vistas and the mountains and the like that are really important. Again, here, it's not, the screening in the sense of it looks like it should belong on this property with the watering that's going on with the agricultural use. It, again, doesn't go above the ridge line there. And in fact, those houses up on the ridge are higher and might arguably block the view more so than the facility itself. Here we painted it gray and white, so it would look like a silo, but also these homes here are painted, most of them are painted white. And, you look at there, you have to know, and I'm sure from their backyard it's different, but they bought the house knowing that, but it's not sticking up again above that ridge line. If it were higher, which the monopine would have been, because it would have had to be 67 feet, you would have seen that and it probably would be more noticeable. And then here, when you're looking at it from the golf course or the Sunbrook homes, you've got to go through trees. So these trees, when they have leaves on them, even more so, are screening. And that's what we mean kind of when we say screening.
Okay. Thank you. I wondered if we could go back to those RF maps for a minute. I know that's
I'm going to have Jeff come up because
I know
I don't want to be a lawyer trying to explain anything based on engineering.
I know it's a fairly technical subject and we went through it pretty quickly, but I did have a couple of questions. So let's see. Was this the first map that we looked at?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I understand this as I look at the map. If we look on the map, there's a sort of a blue or a light blue triangle that looks like it originates at what you referred to as the Santa Clara site.
That's right here.
Yeah, and that Santa Clara site, as I understand it, is located at the Circle Drive Fire Station. Is that correct? Do we know? Oh, it's at the ball fields. Okay. So at Canyon View, at the Canyon View Park. Okay. So up by the tennis courts at the Canyon View Park. So that light blue area, is that showing Help me understand what that is.
So this
I
is
guess.
purely a geographical coverage. So the way the site is currently set up, this is the geographical coverage area that the site's attempting to cover, along with the other, along with the halfway site. So it's an interplay between two different sites combining. So it has to do with both sites are set up with their current tilts is what it is. Okay. With
Okay.
that site off the air. So it's the anticipated geographical coverage area.
So are those angles that it's showing? Is that like the coverage of the antenna that's
Correct.
that's
Yeah. It has to do with the
there?
beam width of the antenna and how big that triangle is going to be. Does that help you?
I think so. Yeah.
And then can I add, because like Jeff has to explain this to me in layman's terms too. So is it fair to say too, Jeff, when we talked about this, where you see the solid color, that means there's good geographical coverage. Where it starts to break up, in particular, like where the colors are blending, that means there isn't good. Is that maybe?
Yes and no. And what she's referring to is right in here. That's where those two cell sites meet. It just means that it's a little less. Your cell phone has a little bit harder time identifying a clear signal from the macro. You're not going to necessarily have poor service, but it's a little more difficult because it's not as dominant of a server. I mean, in a best case scenario, right, is a signal like this. It knows that it's only seeing one cell site, and your cell phone is easily identifying that cell tower.
Yeah. Okay. And that makes sense. And I just, for the record, it says it on the slide, but I was just going to say, this is showing what the coverage would be without the site. So all that area with the broken up colors, that's essentially the issue or the lower coverage that you're trying to address.
Correct.
This site.
And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the capacity on this particular part of Santa Clara is very overused. So you have a lot of residents that are using that site. It's fully at capacity. There's nothing else can be done there.
Mhm.
And that's why Charbonne is so greatly needed there.
So can you give them the highway example?
Yes. So, and what I mean by capacity, so I've got every technology that I'm able to deploy on the Santa Clara site in this southern sector, right? So a highway analogy of what I mean by at a capacity. So if we have 2 lanes on the highway, right? And all of a sudden we have twice the amount of traffic for whatever reason, right? What's going to happen? Those 2 lanes are going to start to back up, and you're not going to be able to maintain the same speed that you would normally on those 2 lanes. So how would I fix that? I would add a 3rd lane. So now all of a sudden those cars can get some diversity, right? And travel that highway at the same speed, but allowing more cars to go through. And that's exactly what's going on here around the whole area, is that influx of people. Now everything's backing up because there's so many more people using those lanes of traffic. And the only way to add that is either add carriers or to add cell sites. That's the only solution.
So if I can try restating something in layman's terms,
Okay.
again, I'm like you, Melissa, this is not my area of expertise, but my perception is we're kind of talking about 2 things. We're talking about the ability for my device to actually connect to a tower.
Okay.
But we're also talking about the capacity of that facility, that tower, to stream data and phone calls and things to and from my device, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when we're looking at these maps, this is talking about the second thing, like the speed of the service, the ability that's what I'm trying to just get a
There's
handle on.
still an interplay between both things of what you're talking about. But
Okay.
these maps here are more, first you have to have the actual RF level to even have that ability, right? And that's what I'm trying to say of best, medium, and poor. Like if you have beyond poor, your smartphone won't even be able to see a tower
So that's
do anything.
So in my example, that's the first thing. That's
Right.
the ability to connect.
Right.
Okay.
And as the more people that use the site too, the harder that site has to maintain that same RF level. It'll shrink it a little bit.
Mhm.
So that's why it's even more critical to first have that RF level just even present. So to the east of Charbonne, right, is our weakest area of what I'm trying to demonstrate here. So that's why that's critical of keeping that on the air to first have that RF level. Plus sorry if I'm jumping around too much, let me know. But going back here of showing what Charbonne's covering. So not only have we added to the RF level so your smartphone can see the site, but now it's also done a network split, sector split. So now Santa Clara site is not trying to cover so much area. It has to cover less area. So it's able to serve those customers better because
Okay.
Charbonne has taken up that middle ground and now is covering that area.
Okay. Yeah, I think that
hopefully
makes sense. Another question I had with both this slide and then I think it was the one with the red, yellow, and green. Not this one. I think it was a later one. This one. So go one more. I think it was the next one. Okay. So my question here is, I see you've identified some areas with those ovals where the service is improved by this site, right? That's what you're showing on that slide. So explain to me again in layman's terms, why is there an area far to the east that receives improved service as opposed to an area just right around the tower?
Okay,
Is it just geography?
Yep, topography, 100% topography. That section there to the east is a high plateau. That's just, it's a higher level to the cell site, so it's easier for it to see. This spot in the middle is a little bit depressed from the topography, and so it's just more difficult for the site to see it. It's that
Okay,
simple.
so it's really just a line of sight issue
Line of
more than
sight,
anything
yep.
else. Okay,
Yeah, the lower your cell site is, the harder it is for it to get further away.
okay, all right. That's really helpful. I appreciate that. So I think that was all the questions I had on the RF maps. My next question is really just, I'm trying to think the best way to phrase this, but really I guess the question is, there's two potential outcomes of this permit process. One is, the city approves a permit, you continue to operate the site. The other is the city decides for some reason not to approve the permit. And then I guess you're left with potentially maybe alternative options. My question is, are there alternative options? What are they? I mean, is this basically, if we don't have this site, do we just have poor service? Can you address that?
Yes, and maybe we'll have Jeff too again because we're getting into the service. But as you saw from Dan's alternative site analysis, and what I realized today is gosh, how close these are. It's not like there's we're talking about a site that's another 10 miles away where these other sites may be built. I mean, the growth in the area has been so significant, and that's I'm flipping around a little bit. This data that Jeff talked about, this is specific data to Santa Clara. It is not Verizon wireless network data. So when we're talking about the downlink data volume, how fast are you getting your emails and everything else that we're streaming? I mean, that 136%, and then the minutes of voice usage in Santa Clara has gone from 2 million to 5 million. And so in order to keep up with that, Verizon built another site after Charbonne. It's got another site in the pipeline. And within this area, as Jeff talked about, and Dan, there isn't another viable option for us to build. Yeah. And there isn't a different technology that we can deploy. We cannot deploy small cell facilities to do what this macro facility is performing. Again, small cells are to complement. They're at a much lower height, usually between 35 and 40 feet. They've only got one technology, usually two, maybe on them. Yeah, one or two. And you'd be looking it wouldn't fill it in. And also because their line of sight is between like 250 feet, 300 feet at the most. You're talking about, who knows, we could need 10 to 15 to like even try to provide some capacity offload there. So then you're dealing with residents who are now saying, we're putting 15 small cells throughout your neighborhood. And it's not to say we're not going to still need some small cells to fill in just because of the demand and the capacity here, but there really isn't another alternative. And the golf course has said no, and the school has said no, I think for pretty compelling reasons. So that's where we'll be left. And the alternative is probably for us to, take a look at what any legal recourse may be. I don't know.
Thank you for that. And you've mentioned a couple of times the responses that you got from St. George City and from the school district. I think those are in your application.
They are in our application. Okay. They're part of the alternative site analysis. We attach them as exhibits. So we have emails from both the city attorney of St. George as well as the Washington County School District.
Okay, great. One other question I had was with respect to co-location. We haven't really talked about that, but I recall when the facility was originally proposed, there was a discussion about it being built so that other antennas could be provided and potentially other providers could use this site as well. Is that correct? I mean, that's how the site is currently built, right?
Yeah. So it could accommodate 2 additional sites.
Okay.
Or 2 additional wireless providers, assuming that works for them, right? So they're going to have to go under Verizon, and usually there needs to be at least a 10-foot separation between the antennas in order for there not to be interference and to allow for equipment size and all that. So then you're talking at probably 50 feet for the next provider, which I think, could still work. But so that's a viable option.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty common. You see the array 10 feet apart, like we talked about up at the park.
Yep.
Those are all co-locates with the 3 towers. The arrays are 10 feet apart.
Yep.
So.
Okay. I think that answers all my questions. I appreciate it.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's back to the red and pink maps. So Jeff, right? Yes. So somewhere it said, I was reading that you, in your alternatives, you were looking for a site near Sunset and Dixie Drive. And it said that was an active search. So I'm talking about the big pink splotch there. Are you trying to remedy that?
Yes.
Currently, or?
Dan, is that, okay, yes.
At Sunset Plaza? So do you?
He's site act, so he knows this better.
Do you have like a heat map like this of what it would look like without Sharburn, but with that site activated?
Is that in our application?
I don't think it's in our application, but if it's something that would be helpful to the commission, we're happy to.
I would like to see that. Because to me, it seems like you talked about, you were really concerned with supplying the whole, where Sunbrook is, with the whole of getting them service. But there's a lot more people in that pink area than there is down there. And so I was just curious to see what it would look like, what it would look like with the other.
So Charbonne is off, and then the Sunset Plaza proposed site is on, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I can do that.
It might also be helpful to have both of them on, right? To see
and both too, to see what it would, with the ultimate and with that one turned off, to see who's losing out,
Well, and if you look at the map right here, if you did add one up in the pink without Charbonne, you're still not going to get any of that service down there because Charbonne is dropped off in that hole down the riverbed. So you're going to lose all the coverage that you're ultimately seeking to get with the Charbonne coverage.
I'd be curious to see that, just to see what it looks like.
If I could make a comment, kind of segueing off of what Logan said, when we look at this one with the blue and the yellow, that one, what's kind of interesting to me is that shows it without Charbonne, and then the next slide shows that that doesn't show anything. So it's kind of like if I'm showing retail sales and I have a graph, it shows with Amazon and I show one without Amazon, it's like a completely different graph. There's no scale, if that makes sense. Maybe just because we're not as smart as you guys are, but we can't, that doesn't show me what that coverage looks like. So I would think for me, one thing that would be helpful is to see that same map, the blue and the gold one, where, you know, you can see halfway is providing that yellow coverage. You can see that the Santa Clara Tower is providing that turquoise coverage, but then this map shows it without Charbonne. What does that look like now with Charbonne? That exact same map, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And then is that possibly in the full package?
Yeah, that one
There-
probably.
I
is.
think
Okay.
it was.
And I was just simply trying to showcase that to make
Yeah.
it easier on the eye, but I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you know, it's just kind of like we're not smart enough to fill in all those gaps. You know what it is because you look at that stuff all day, and we don't know what you're hardly talking about.
It is in the package because I looked at it. So if you go to your package that you were provided, it's in there for you to look at to answer that question.
Yeah, well, I don't have it with me, so thank you.
Commissioner, we'll let Mr. Entz know which page it's on so that we can answer.
Yeah, that's good.
When we send it, they just don't have that.
So I guess I have just like a couple of questions, and maybe they're rhetorical questions a little bit, I guess. But just as I was listening to our esteemed legal counsel's questions, you know, some of these things, you know, it talks about, you know, the phone calls went from 2 million to 5 million. Well, that's Santa Clara and surrounding areas. What is that? Southern Utah, or what's the surrounding area? Because I don't think we got 3 million new calls a year in Santa Clara, did we?
Which slider?
Yeah.
Can we?
Yeah,
Pull that up.
yeah, per day.
Minutes.
Oh, yeah, minutes per day. Oh, I apologize. So that's why is this site needed? It was down here at one of the last slides. Was it, which one was it?
Page 30.
Page 30? Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think 3 million minutes sounds like, that doesn't sound like Santa Clara.
Yeah, I think we'll double check on the surrounding areas. It includes St. George. I mean, we weren't trying to say that we were just focused on.
Yeah,
Santa
okay.
Clara, this neighborhood.
Well, I guess it could include Ivans as well, right?
Yes.
I mean,
maybe,
because
yeah.
we've got Ivans, us and St. George all together. So
Yeah. So we'll double check what is included in surrounding areas and provide that clarification. I mean, I just note though, you're looking at July of 2019 and then January 2022. I mean, COVID happened, right? So everybody's working at home using their wireless devices for their calls when they normally would have been in the office.
well, and that's a huge impact because I was working up north before I came down to Southern Utah, and everybody was virtual for 6 months. And then after 6 months, it was, 5 days per pay period in the office, 5 days from home, because they could only allow so many people in the office. Another big impact here, I think, is the census and the demographics that came out in 2020 census shows the area growing. And I'll tell you who's putting a big impact on our system. St. George City and their residents are putting a huge impact on our system because their population went from 89,000 to 95,000 is what we were told based on the 2020 census. That's 6,000 more people.
And Jim, when you say our system, are you talking about the self-serve?
Yeah, I'm talking about this system in Santa Clara City.
Okay.
Our system that we're talking about tonight, the census is giving credit for all this population growth to St. George. They're giving them the majority of the credit and giving Santa Clara and Ivans only a little credit, even though we know we're growing too.
Sure.
But if St. George is now 95,000 people, they're the big dog. They're the first to 100,000 in the county, of course.
And so I guess that kind of leads to my next question, which is, and it's kind of off what Logan's asking about the only site thing. Just thinking about it, it seems like most of the benefit is to St. George and most of the impacts on Santa Clara. Am I reading that right, or does that? What do you see?
I mean, I would respond to that by saying I can see how that would be true. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know
I don't know
if
the
that's
answer.
a problem or not a problem, but that's just kind of the way I see it.
Well, we're growing and they're growing.
Yeah.
The development that we refer to adjacent to this, where all the new homes are,
Sure.
that's Sullivan Homes, that's in St. George City.
Yeah.
And then just right down at the toe of that slope is Santa Clara, where the road is. So you can see how they're growing right on our edge. They're putting population right next to us.
Right.
I think to some extent, and this is just my opinion, so, don't take this for gospel or anything, but I mean, to some extent, that's just part and parcel of this type of service, I mean, because, these wireless facilities don't really know city boundaries.
Sure.
I think certainly St. George residents are receiving a benefit from this facility, I believe. What that is in comparison to Santa Clara residents, I don't know, but I think that certainly Santa Clara residents are benefiting from it. In fact, and Melissa did point out in her presentation that, the Santa Clara Ivans Fire Department has, offered support for this application, saying that, this benefits specifically our area for, in terms of public safety. So, whether we can quantify, who's benefiting more from it, I don't know. You may be right. I don't.
Well, and I was just kind of a rhetorical question. We were driving down Sunset Boulevard or Sunset Boulevard today, and we were talking about all the traffic that comes through St. George to come to Santa Clara.
Mhm.
And that doesn't necessarily benefit the people in St. George for all of us to drive through their street right there, right?
Yeah.
So that's just part of the way this rolls.
Yeah.
Let me play devil's advocate. I live in Santa Clara. I drive down Dixie Drive to my office right by Tonnequit Cemetery every day. The benefit of this tower benefits me as a resident of Santa Clara because I drive into St. George to go to work. I think we're looking at this wrong in the fact that we're not helping someone else. The rising tides lift all ships, guys. This is a benefit to everyone. It doesn't matter that it's in Santa Clara and it impacts us that way. It impacts everyone around it. We need to be good neighbors. This isn't a point of lock the gate. This is a point of serve all.
And Commissioner Call, if I could just add an additional point, that it is serving Santa Clara in the sense that it is helping to offload from the Santa Clara site that is significantly overloaded at capacity now. So that's another reason that it is benefiting the Santa Clara residents.
Right. And I maybe I should have clarified that just a little bit. I'm not personally opposed to this, but I think that when we're going to have some discussion items with our community and our neighbors about some of these things. And sometimes it's good for us to have a little bit more understanding about how all that works. Right.
Sure. Absolutely. Right. Like, let's ask all the tough questions now so we can, figure, have what the answers are, and you guys get all the information you need so you're prepared to when those comments and questions come in.
Well, I think Matt brought up a good point, and the Commissioner Hendrickson and everyone for that regard, that the cell service doesn't know boundaries. It doesn't.
Right.
So how do we all work together? It's just a lot of the St. George residents are utilizing the system, as are Ivans, as are Santa Clara. Everybody wants their 5G. The ridiculous thing is the age of the kids and how many phones are in each home. My kids had to wait till they were 12 or 13. Nowadays, they're getting them at 8, 9, 10 years old. It's just crazy.
Well, my 11-year-old gave me a PowerPoint presentation a few weeks ago.
I know,
why
it's all
she should get a
changed.
phone.
It's all changed. Yeah.
It's not a lawyer's kid at all.
Right.
So we're
Right. It has very much changed. And that's the world we're living in right now. So.
All right.
One more comment. I'm just totally impressed with how thorough your information was, how relevant it was, how, critical points to look at. Very well done. Really, really appreciate the caliber of this information so we can make good decisions.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
I concur. Well done. Thank you very much.
Great. We'll get that
That's it
additional
from
information over to Mr.
everybody
Ensign that
today?
you have requested.
Okay. All right. I think that's
Do we want to?
Yeah.
Look,
Mark, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but should we just have a brief discussion then about sort of next steps?
yes, please.
Okay. So appreciate Verizon Wireless and making their presentation tonight. They were well within the parameters that we gave them to keep it succinct, and just want to thank them for that. So we have a couple of options. We have really in terms of the time that the city is allowed under law to consider this application, we really have plenty of time. I mean, we technically could go until September if we felt like we needed it. My sense is I don't think we're going to need all that. And so my question for you, the commission, is how do you want to proceed from here? What I anticipate that we will do when you indicate to us that you're ready to move into a final decision, we're going to prepare for you basically a written decision containing findings and details from Verizon's application, so that we feel like we have a thorough decision that we can present. That'll take a little bit of time to prepare, but we can prepare that, give you a little time to review it, and then you can come back and vote on it. We could do that as soon as your next meeting if you wanted to move that quickly. You've asked for a couple of pieces of information from the applicant, which I'm sure they'll get to us, fairly quickly as well. If you want to take next meeting and have this as a discussion item again, look at the additional information that they provide, and then look at potentially a final decision in the following meeting, we can do that as well. So
does this go to a public hearing again?
So do you want to address that?
Yeah, the state statute has changed for conditional uses. It's a public meeting. So we will notice it as a public meeting, not a public hearing. Conditional uses are not a public hearing. So we will notice it as a public meeting to all property owners within 300 feet of this facility. And it's up to the planning commission and the chair whether or not they're going to take public comment in a public meeting. You don't necessarily have to. We can go through the process without opening it up to public comment through the public meeting process. But if the planning commission feels that there are a few people you'd like to hear from, you can do that as well. Do you want to go on the next step of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's always your prerogative if there's someone present that, expresses a desire to comment.
Maybe it's opposing legal counsel or something like that. I don't know.
That would be your prerogative, but there won't be a specifically noticed public hearing. So
my question would be, can we do that, the public meeting, and then have another week maybe to make this, another meeting to make that decision to kind of mull it over, to kind of break it up?
We can.
That's fairly common that we do have the public meeting. You consider all of the information, the application, any other comment that you feel is needed or necessary, and then you continue it for the next meeting in 2 weeks to come back and make a decision. And that scenario works as well.
So Jim and my recommendation would be that they get us the new information, and we have the public meeting our next calendared meeting, and we issue the opinion the next. They've done a great job in presenting information. I've made my mind up. I'm not going to go there, but I just think that we need to be fair and equitable to all parties, and public meeting is a public meeting, not a public hearing. We need to think about that too as we go forward.
I think that works just fine. So we'll put it back on the agenda for your next meeting. We have the information we need to get the public notice out. So I think we can get that taken care of before the next meeting, right, Jim?
Yes, we would do, agendas are a week ahead of time. So that notice would go out next week prior to the following week's meeting on June 23rd.
But we will assume that there won't be a final vote until the following meeting. So, which would be July
13th.
July 13th.
Either the 13th or the 14th. I have to look at calendars.
It is the 14th.
We have council. I think it's the 4th. Is it the 14th? Okay, thank you.
And so we'll invite Verizon to have representatives available next time as well. If you guys would be welcome to appear in person, or if you wanted to just appear over Zoom, I think that would be fine too. So that if there's more questions, and that's how we'll proceed.
Okay.
Thanks,
Sounds like
everybody.
a plan.
I think that sounds great. Thank you. We'll look forward to that. All right. Last item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our last meeting on May 26th. I know you all read it thoroughly. So I got a recommendation to approve that.
Make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from May 26th as stated in the record.
Thank you, Mark.
I will second that motion.
All right, I've got a first from Mark and a second from Curtis. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
We will approve those minutes and we will adjourn this planning commission meeting until the next date, which is a week from today.
June 23rd, 2 weeks
June
from today.
23rd, 2 weeks. Okay. Very good. With that, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.